This is Michael Parker, and you're watching Time to Connect.
Hey, Michael Parker, thanks so much for taking the time to connect. I really appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me.
You bet, man. Let's see, you and I first got in contact in conjunction with this Will Johnson book
Mhm.
that I'm doing. In fact, just for you, I wore this Centromatic t-shirt today.
I like it.
I do want to talk to you about our connection there with Will and about music in general, because I know it's something that's important to you.
Mhm.
Obviously, you're primarily a novelist and short story writer, and I want to talk about that. Particularly, I want to talk about I Am the Light of This World, your most recent novel, which I just got around to reading, and man, I really enjoyed it. It's it's a bit depressing, but
Perfect.
it's a beautiful novel.
Thank
Um,
you.
Let me see. Where are you coming to us from? Are you in back in North Carolina?
Yes, I'm in Durham, North Carolina.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you sort of had a Texas to North Carolina back and forth thing going, haven't you, for a while?
Yeah. Yeah. So I first got to Texas in 2008 when I was teaching at UT in their creative writing program, but I was just there for a semester. And then I ended up meeting a woman, and we were sort of back and forth until I bought a house in Austin in 2012. But I was still moving back and forth because I had a teaching job here in North Carolina. Um, and then I retired in 2018 and moved to Austin full time, and was there until last year when I came back to North Carolina.
What, if you don't mind me asking, what brought you back to North
Well,
Carolina?
it was a combination of things. I mean, I feel like the vibe in Austin changed pretty quickly. I lived right off South Congress, and just the differences between South Congress in 2008, 2009, and now is just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And my daughter's here in Durham, and I wanted to be closer to her. And I have family here, a brother, sister here that just, we are all spread out across the country, and we all moved back to North Carolina about the same time. So
Gotcha.
felt like a good move.
You might, I don't know if you can hear the thunder in the background here. I hope our internet connection stays stable. We got a little thunderstorm moving through. Well, yeah, Austin's changed a lot, man. And of course, the joke, and I've talked about this with a number of my guests, the joke is, oh, you should have been here in whatever it may be.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
I can tell you, I moved to Texas in 1973. In
Mhm.
fact, a lot of your descriptions of Austin in that novel during that time and the music and whatnot really rang true to me. But I wanted to move to Austin. I discovered it pretty quickly. It took me 20 years to get there. I moved there in '93, I believe. And the
Mhm.
first song I wrote when I got there, Michael, the opening line was "Los Angeles has moved to Austin,"
Huh.
uh, and
Great.
that was 30 years ago.
Uh-huh.
So, I heard one time a guy say, overheard a guy in the street saying, "Oh man, you should have been here in the '40s. That's when Austin was really cool." But yeah, man, it's hard. It's hard living there now. It's still a great place to visit, and it's still my favorite place in Texas. You know, for music and a lot of different things. But yeah, it's changed a lot for sure.
Yeah, I miss Texas. I'm not one of those people who said, you know, I don't go outside of Austin. The rest of Texas is scary. I like the rest of Texas. I mean,
Yeah.
I traveled all over the state, and I'm not worried about people outside of Austin. I came from a small rural community in North Carolina. I know how to talk to people. I
Yeah.
know how to not get killed. So,
Yeah. Did you make it out to Big Bend at all while you were here?
times, yeah, I was in Marfa for 6 months once, and then a couple summers, spent a month or two there. Yeah.
Yeah, man, absolutely one of my favorite places.
Yeah. Beautiful.
So let's do a little, before we get into jump into some specific topics. Let's do a little bio. I know you kind of started it, but give me a little bit more. Maybe what were you like as a kid? How you got into this business of writing? How do you, in a nutshell, how do you kind of tell the story of your life?
Uh, can I cuss?
Of course.
Yeah, okay. I was a total fuck up as a kid. Total fuck up. I come from a very bookish family. My family were big readers, even though we lived out in the middle of the country, and no one around us was that way. But my father was a newspaper editor, and my mother taught Latin at the high school. We're very sort of lower middle class, but reading was important.
What
So
town?
Clinton, North Carolina.
Okay.
It's halfway between Raleigh and Wilmington. So it's known for now for having more hogs than people. I mean, it always did, but that's what people say about it now.
Okay.
Yeah, my upbringing was, I had a strong interest in and focus on art, reading, and it was very important to my parents. All my brothers and sisters were like valedictorian and straight A's and straight edge. And then it got to me and I just went completely wild when I was maybe 14 and stayed that way until I was 22, maybe. So not great student in high school and definitely not a good student in college. Flunked out after a year and a half at a place called Appalachian State, which everyone says is pretty much impossible to flunk out of, but I proved them wrong.
Were you just
now.
were you just not going to class, or what? Why were you struggling?
You name it.
What's that?
You name it. I was doing it, or not doing it. Going to class, I wasn't doing, but I just I wasn't ready for college. I mean, I taught at a university for 32 years. I know exactly. I can point out the students who aren't ready.
Yeah.
How that is.
Yeah.
So I just wasn't ready. I just wanted to hang out and listen to music with my friends and go hear bands and stuff like that. And then I worked menial jobs for 2 or 3 years, maybe longer, and moved to Seattle, lived with my sister for a while. And then I came back to North Carolina, moved to Chapel Hill. And eventually, after working as in a warehouse, and I was assistant manager of a Army Navy surplus store. That's one of my favorite jobs. I got into night school at Chapel Hill, evening college, they called it. And I happened to be lucky enough to study with this writer named Lee Smith, who was just then becoming, a famous, well-known writer in the South, but all over, really. I mean, her work kind of transcends the South. And she was very encouraging. And I'd always wanted to write, but I never felt like I didn't have the discipline. And with her, all I needed was that push and that kind of encouragement. And then I was off. I mean, I just started writing every day and still pretty much write every day.
And I think you're a little bit younger than me. What year were you born?
59.
59. Yeah, I'm 56. So you were talking when you were going to college, that was kind of late 70s, I guess. That would be.
Yeah, exactly. I started at 77 and.
Yeah. Well, man, that was a pretty exciting time in terms of music and drugs and still kind of a lot of the open culture of the 60s was with us, and I can see maybe having trouble in college during that time for sure. What were some of the writers that you read early that really resonated with you?
Kerouac. I was totally into the beats when I was in high school.
Yeah.
The thing about the beats that people don't give them credit for is, you read Ginsberg and he mentions Whitman, and you read Whitman, and then he also talks about André Gide, and you read Gide, and then there's all the French symbolist poets, Rimbaud, Verlaine, Apollinaire, Valery, all those poets that they worship, I began to read. And so really I read a lot of poetry, and it all came through the beats, because I didn't really have any other avenue into reading poetry at the time. And then I began to read, more contemporary stuff like Ken Kesey, and Hunter Thompson.
Sure.
And then at some point, I guess when I was in college, I started reading really contemporary writers like Ann Beattie, Mary Robeson, Elizabeth Tallent, Raymond Carver, of course, Tobias Wolff. And that was in the early 80s when everybody was reading, especially Carver. He was a big influence on a lot of people. And on me, even though I don't write at all like him, I mean, my prose and his prose is completely not in the same planet, really.
Yeah, you are, I just recently put out an episode on this podcast with Willie Vlotten, and I think you're probably similar to him in some ways. He was saying that Carver was a big influence on him, but when a writing teacher early on, kind of like yours, said, "Hey man, I know you," and she said, "You need to read Larry Brown."
Mhm.
And he said he read Larry Brown. And it was like, okay, I admired Raymond Carver. He's important to me, but Larry Brown was just more kind of in my wheelhouse. I'm guessing Larry Brown is someone you read as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was publishing books by the time, Larry Brown was publishing
Gotcha.
books. He
Yeah.
was a little bit before me, and we actually have the same publisher now. We share the same Algonquin, and I met him a couple times. Great guy,
Yeah.
really sweet guy. Yeah.
Yeah. How about
Um,
Ron Rash? He's also from your neck of the woods. Is that somebody
yeah,
you've,
I've known him for, I don't know, 25 years. He's
uh-huh.
actually from the mountains of North Carolina. So, I don't know if you know that North Carolina is divided into um, people that like tomato sauce on their vinegar on their barbecue and vinegar on their barbecue. So
Okay.
he's more of a tomato sauce kind of guy on his
Uh,
barbecue.
mm,
I'm vinegar.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the
I'm,
eastern part of the state is vinegar.
I'm with you there, man.
Yeah.
What would you say are some of the similarities and or differences between what you do and songwriting?
Um, I mean, I'm so influenced by music that, I write by ear. Rhythm is very important to me, sentence rhythm, syntax. Um, with the last book, On the Light of This World, a friend of mine read it and said it seemed shoegazy, that he thought it reminded him of
Ah,
shoegaze,
uh-huh.
because it's kind of meditative and, because the character is so sort of in between places and there's a lot he said it sounded like reverb and felt like there's a lot of reverb, which is, of course, I loved.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the point of view on that novel is really interesting because it's sort of I get would you call it it's clearly from Earl's point of view, but it's not first person. It's sort of omniscient, but from
Yeah,
his
well,
point
I
of view.
would call it third person close or free indirect discourse. I mean, I guess that's an academic term for it, but
Yeah.
I'm just sort of trying to get in the rhythm, or I was trying to get in the rhythm of his consciousness and make the reader understand the world through the way he sees things. And
Yeah, yeah. And you did that for sure. Let me hold though. I want to ask you some more about that novel. Let me hold. There's something else I wanted to ask you about. One of the reasons I asked you about the similarities between what you do and writing songs, I love the essay that you contributed to this Will Johnson book. Thank you so much again for that. And by the way, it's had delay after delay, delay after delay. We're looking at probably 2025 now for the publication of that, but I've got some great essays in there. Jason Isbell has a really good one. Patterson Hood has a really good one. A lot of them, but yours is absolutely one of my favorite. And if you don't mind, I'm going to read a short excerpt from it. Is that
sure.
okay?
Yeah,
But one thing that really shocked me a little bit is you mentioned that you probably got maybe it was one of your daughter maybe was saying that kind of giving you a hard time about getting some of the lyrics wrong of Will's songs, and you said that that didn't surprise you because you've never been that attentive to lyrics.
I mean, I know a lot of Dylan songs and I don't know the lyrics. I mean,
Gotcha. I mean, as a wordsmith, as a writer, that just that surprises me. Why do you suppose that is?
I'm just so interested in rhythm. I'm interested in
Yeah.
the notes themselves, and that's how I think about literature. I mean, words, of course, are huge, and lyrics are huge, but I'm not that good at memorizing lyrics.
Mhm.
Like I know some people who you can say, oh, Subterranean Homesick Blues, and they can recite the whole thing. I'm just not good at that.
I got you.
Um,
Yeah. So Dylan's come up a couple times. I want to ask you about Dylan, but before I do, and I keep putting things off here, but I want to read this little excerpt, and you probably don't even remember this. It's been probably a year or more that you wrote this essay, but it's so good, man. You were talking here about Will Johnson's new novel, and you said, reading it, I felt kind of jealous. Here's a man who has written some of my favorite ever songs, songs that saved me and laid me bare at once, and made paintings that feel, at first glance, documentary in nature, but that evoke the true spirit of ball fields and ball players who who are taken for granted as spaces or people. And he writes this novel, and it moves me to near tears with its formal sorting out of lives forever struggling in a place you can't wait to leave, that when you do leave, stays inside of you, inescapably, the sort of place I come from, and manages to make it funny and poignant, its confused characters resilient in a way that does not seem the least bit contrived. I mean, I give up. All I knew to do is stand out of the man's light. That's so beautiful. Give us just a quick, super quick nutshell of how you encountered Will and what that relationship's been.
You know, I had a friend in Austin who was friends with Will, and I found out that he knew Will, and I had a novel that had just come out. It's called If You Want Me to Stay.
Yeah.
I had a lot. It was about 3 kids who grew up loving soul music. And so it has a soundtrack, you know, just like this book does,
Yep.
the last book, but it's all soul music. And so I said to him, to our mutual friend, can you get this book to Will? And he said, sure. And then he got it to him, and then Will wrote me a letter, you know, 3 months later, and then we started corresponding. And then I was out in Marfa, and I had a friend who ran a restaurant there, and Will was scheduled to do a show at an art gallery beside the restaurant. So we invited Will to have dinner. Will and Jesse to have dinner on us in the restaurant, and that's when I first met him. And then when I moved to Austin, we, you know, got together from time to time, and yeah.
Did it surprise you at all? And it's funny how you say, you know, you give up. I mean, what the guy makes incredible songs and paintings, and then he comes up with his first novel that's just like, are you kidding me? Did that surprise you at all?
Completely, like, what?
Yeah.
I just couldn't. I mean, I knew it would be good because he's so attentive to language.
Yeah.
And his lyrics are so good. I mean, inscrutable sometimes, but, you know, in ways that I think are very evocative. But, you know, the thing about that book is the form of it, the shape of it is so good. And that's not something that first novels usually get right.
Yeah.
It's something you really have to work at. And he just sort of figured it out, you know, he just found it on it. But it does make sense because form has a musical element to it. And the way you structure a book has some sense of music. And so it would make sense, but I mean, it didn't explain how good it was, and you know, how moving. It was a really moving book.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, another similarity to Willie Flaughton. Have you read Willie's stuff?
I have read his stuff, yeah. I haven't read the new one, but I read Leno Pete. Is that the
Yep.
title?
Yeah.
Beautiful book, yeah.
It is. Well, I highly recommend his new one. It's called The Horse.
Mhm.
Especially for someone like you who music is important to you. It very much revolves around a songwriter, guitar player. So let's see, is it 8 novels you have now?
Yes, 8 novels, yeah.
And 2 or 3 short story collections?
3.
3, yeah. Yeah, one of the things I want to ask you about that story. Let me just ask you about that one now. Hidden Meanings.
Oh, yeah.
Such an interesting little thing. You know, I also, I didn't teach creative writing, but I taught for years in the English department down here at Texas A&M University. I taught sophomore lit, freshman English, and tech writing for years. And so, and then I ended up teaching business communication in the business school for the last part of my career there before I retired. But you know, I definitely relate to the professor with reading. So it's set up, for those who haven't read it, it's set up like a student paper. It's a real departure for you, though, isn't it? I don't think you've ever published anything quite like this. Can you just maybe talk about it a little bit, how it came about?
I really have I mean, that was definitely different for me, a different kind of formal approach to the short story. I have no idea where it came from. I wrote the whole thing in one sitting. Well, no, that's not true. There's a scene in the middle where the student who's writing the essay talks about her father, and that really kind of sticks the knife in and turns it.
Yes.
And you know, without that, the story didn't have enough gravity. I don't think there's just not enough weight, and it seemed a little bit like I was making fun of her, which was not my objective at all. I really was making fun of the teacher.
Exactly. Yeah, I got that.
Yeah.
I got that. Yeah.
So without that, I think without that information, about that autobiographical information that she put in, it really wasn't successful. So, but I mean, I love Joe Tex. I love that song. I grew
Yep.
up with that song, and I think what I think the impetus for it was I was listening to some song which was just silly, and I thought, what if someone took this seriously and wrote like a serious
Yeah.
essay about it, or a serious kind of like dismantling of it. I don't know. And what would that be like? And so that was kind of where it came from.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one, and it's gotten a lot of attention, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I
I mean,
haven't.
of any story I've ever written, that's the one that people mention the most.
So interesting because it's such a departure for you. Well, let's see. Your first novel, Hello Down There, is, by the time this episode goes live, it will have just been re-released. I'm looking forward to reading that one. That's one I haven't read of yours. What led to the re-release of that thing after, what is it, 32 years?
Yeah, it was supposed to be for the 30th year anniversary, but as you well know, publishing is kind of a little bit behind.
Yeah, and then COVID.
Yeah, COVID pushed things back, and the publisher is a great publisher here in Durham, and they do a lot of books from all over. And so I knew the publisher years ago. She took a class with me, and we talked, and she said she'd be willing to bring it out. And
Nice.
it was it's kind of weird to talk about something that you wrote 32 years ago.
Yeah.
I was such a different person and such a different writer. But it's also been educational to go back and read it. And there are parts I really remember writing, and there are other parts I'm like, who is this person? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
who wrote this?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the difficult things about writing is being objective. I mean, and it is interesting to look at something you wrote many years ago, and you see it in a whole different light. But when you're in it, you're in it.
yeah.
How do you stay objective? Do you have any ideas for how you try to stay objective in terms of your own work?
Well, I usually put something away for a while. I don't,
Yeah.
I write it and then I put it away, and I
Yeah.
put it leave it in a file now. I write everything by hand. So then I type it up, and then I bring it out after a couple months. So my judgment will be fresh.
Yeah.
And but sometimes that things aren't going to work. I've written 3 novels since 3 drafts of not 3 drafts of 3 novels since I published I'm the Light of This World, which was maybe 3 years ago, I guess.
2 or 3 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the pandemic. I didn't have anything else to do, really. I mean, but none of them are good enough for me to even show my agent. I just know
Really?
they're not up to my standard. And I think that's surprising to some people that a novelist would not a novelist would write a novel and then not want to push forward or not want to revise it. But it's just like, I guess, songs or poems,
Yeah.
or some of them that just don't go. I mean, they're not going to work,
That's
and
right.
you learn from doing it, and then you have to push them aside and go on to the next thing.
One thing I've done with songs, and I've certainly had a lot more songs that were, if not finished, pretty much fleshed out and ended up in the in the waste pile, than I have songs that I've recorded and feel good about. But sometimes what I've done with those is I've gotten someone else to look at them, and I guess the equivalent of an editor with a novel. Do you have an editor that you maybe you rely on once in a while to say, hey, help me get unstuck here?
Yeah, my editor's great. I mean, she'll read everything in a draft. I've worked with her for a long time, but I have other writer friends
Yeah.
whose judgment I really trust.
Yeah.
So I go to them first.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I hope one of those novels gets reworked and published soon. You're due for another one to come out. Well, let's talk about I Am the Light of This World. Man, I was completely captivated by the world of Earl Boudreaux. Really, especially the first half. For those who haven't read it, it's divided into 2 halves. Austin and Oregon, I guess we could say, and a very unfortunate weekend, a long lost weekend that he had that haunted him the rest of his life. But man, the descriptions of Austin, and the Hamilton Pool and Barton Springs and the music that was happening then really rang true for me. Maybe just and water definitely figures a lot in this novel, doesn't it? Maybe just, if you don't mind, talk a little bit about how you got the idea for this and how it came about.
Sure.
And
I mean,
maybe for those who haven't read it, without giving too much away, maybe talk about who is Earl.
okay, yeah. Earl is a 17-year-old boy from East Texas, who's lower middle class, working class, actually, he's working class. And his parents are neglectful, to say the least. His father's kind of sometimes around, not much. His mother spends all her time talking on the telephone to her sisters. He's got two brothers who don't pay him any mind. And he meets this young woman in this East Texas town who says her mother is in the state mental hospital up in Austin State Hospital. It's a real place, and she asks him to take her up to Austin. And then what happens, it's kind of the crux of the novel. As you said, there's a lost weekend. A lot of things happen, some of them really bad. And then Earl ends up going to prison. This isn't giving away too much, I don't think, but he goes to prison for a crime he did not commit, and he's in there for 40 years. But I don't say anything. I don't really have any scenes written in prison, because prison novels, there's a lot of them that are really good. And the other thing about prison, I mean, I don't personally know. I've been to jail, but not prison. But you do the same thing every day. It's very static. So as a writer, to capture that would just be repetitive. And I don't know, maybe you can make it interesting. I have read people who made it interesting. But I was not interested in that so much. I was interested in what happened after he got out. So, and when he leaves Texas and goes to Oregon, and I won't say anything about what happens there.
Okay. Yeah. You call that prison time or he calls it the in between, right?
Right. Yeah.
No, I kind of like. I didn't know why you sort of left that out, but it made sense to me somehow that it was almost like a movie. And in fact, speaking of that, your writing seems to me to really lend itself to a film script. Has anything of yours been turned into a film, or has anyone expressed interest in that?
No, I had a guy who was interested in my first novel and writing it, and he optioned it. He was an actor, and he wrote the screenplay and sent it to me. And the screenplay was 360 pages long. And I don't know anything about screenwriting, but I do know one thing, that it's not meant to be over 120 pages.
Yeah.
That 120 pages is 2 hours.
Yeah.
So I thought, unless you're David Lean, this isn't really going to work out. And then he kind of understood that, and then he went away. And then there was a couple guys that wanted to option If You Want Me to Stay and make a movie out of that. And these things just, you hear from these people and then they go away. And I never heard anything more from them.
Yeah. Well, I think this one in particular could make a really interesting film. So water figures heavily there, and I know that was obviously conscious in your part. I don't know if you want to say anything about it. And the pedal steel, I wanted to ask you about that. That was really an interesting little kind of feature of his I guess you'd call it obsession with pedal steel.
Yeah. I mean, he's that's the instrument that really sends him. He feels like a deep emotional connection to it. It evokes all these feelings for him that he can't really define.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is a section, which I'll read if you want me to, about his ideas about pedal steel, or the way not ideas so much as the way it makes him feel.
Yeah, let's do that. Let me put you on speaker view, and
it's pretty short. Earl's father once took him on a walk through the woods to a pond where he taught him the words to "I'm so lonesome I could cry." Even when his father disappeared for weeks, Earl had his transistor radio, on which his father claimed to have listened to stations out of Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Matamoros, Mexico, when he was a boy in his bed at night. Was there anything in the world more romantic than listening to radio stations from other countries illicitly after lights out? Yes, there sure was, and Earl came one day to hear it on some old 45 of his father's. Earl couldn't even remember who was singing or about what. He just remembered lying on the floor watching the warped vinyl hiccup, and here came an ample solo of what he would learn was pure pedal steel. Earl felt draped by a blanket and shocked by cattle prod. The pedal steel both softened and sharpened. Say you were a river. Say there was no wind. Still river equaled words set to music written out flat on a page. Now add pedal steel. Wing it in on a westerly breeze. Hear the plaintive shiver of leaves through trees lining the blank. Pedal steel could turn a song into what? Earl didn't know. Your heart struggling to stay in rhythm and burst out of you at the same time? Trying to define it made Earl feel foolish, and this is how he knew it was true. He would die trying, and that is how he knew it was true.
Beautiful, man. Beautiful.
Thank you.
If I know anything about the subscribers to this podcast, I think you just got some fans right there. Well, that's really great. Well, let's see. Maybe I can we can kind of start winding down here with some kind of short answer questions, if you don't mind, just to get to know you a little bit.
Okay.
What are you listening to right now?
The new Gillian Welch David Rawlings record that just came out yesterday, I think.
Oh man.
Yeah, amazing.
So
really,
good.
really beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, the song Hashtag, which was written for Guy Clark, is the real gem of that record. I mean, Gillian's incredible, but that song of David's, I mean, who knows? They may have co-written it, but he sings it so good. I mean, first time I heard it, I don't want to sound too melodramatic, but I welled up just in that chorus with their harmonies. It's just so beautiful.
Yeah.
Anything else you listen to do these days or recently?
I'm trying to think what else I've listened to. There's a guy named Justice Prophet out of LA. He used to be in punk bands, and then he put out a couple solo records. I've been listening to his new record. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you gotten out to see any of the Jason Isbell shows now that Will is touring with them?
He's getting ready to come here, so
Great.
and I guess mid-October. So he's going to be in Durham for 2 days, so I get to hang out and take him down to there's 2 really famous ballparks here. I don't know if you ever watched the movie Bull Durham.
Sure.
Yeah, well, that's set in Durham, and the original ballpark that it's filmed in is downtown, so we'll pay that a visit.
Good. Yeah, that'll be right up his alley. Fantastic. Glad to hear that. And what are you reading these days?
I just got through reading a book by an Irish writer. It's called The Bee Sting by Paul Murray. Okay. But I want to tell everybody about this novel called Prophet Song. It's by a guy named Paul Lynch. And I just judged an international contest called the Dayton Literary Peace Prize. And the books were really good. It was hard to choose. But I had read Prophet Song when it first came out. And, it was by far the best of the bunch. Just brilliant, absolutely brilliant book. Just and kind of terrifying too in a good way. But in fact, that's my suggestion for everyone to run out and buy that book.
Okay, good. When you're buying a book of yours or two, add that one to the list.
Yeah.
Let me see. You've won a lot of awards. What is the one that meant the most to you?
I would say recently being inducted into the Texas Institute of Letters. which is a great honor because I'm not a Texan. And I wasn't in Texas for all that long, but the last three of my books have been partially set or all the way set with like All I Want in This World is set entirely in West Texas. So to have Texas writers, take me seriously enough as a faux Texan to welcome me in their ranks has really meant a lot to me.
Good, good. I just had a random thought. I'm a big fan of the writer William Goyen, and I don't hear many people talking about him anymore. Is that somebody who have you read him? Do you admire his work?
I've been reading his work for 40 years. I mean, he's a huge, huge influence on me. I read Had I 100 Mouths when I was maybe an undergrad. And then I had a professor named George Garrett who's really good friends with Goyen. And I read This House of Breath and ended up teaching that book. And I taught Southern literature for a while. And I taught that book, which is not an easy, it's not an easy thing. It's not, I wouldn't say it's teachable really, but that didn't matter. I mean, the students got sort of the essence of it. And I mean, his work is just, and the fact that no one talks about him anymore is criminal.
It is.
Really.
Yeah. I really like his short stories. That they've had a real impact on me. I'm going to send you one of my songs. It's called "To Remember," and it's loosely about William Goyen. I'll send you that.
Yeah, look
Online.
forward
I'm
to it.
so glad to hear that you're a fan of his. Let's see, pet peeves. You have any pet peeves? What pisses you off?
Well, we won't get into the political spectrum.
Okay, okay.
Stay away from that. Um, you know, I hesitate to say this a little bit, but there is a certain kind of novel these days that's sort of very topical and ideological, which is good. I have no problem with ideological fiction, but if it's message oriented
Mm.
and it's pitched to a certain moment in time and that time only, I just don't see what the point of that is. I'm just confused by it. Because if it's only supposed to be relevant to the next year or the past year, then I just don't understand why art should be targeting such a sort of small, focused time, place. It's not really a pet peeve. It's just something
Yeah.
I just don't understand it as a writer. It's a new trend that I can't really get behind.
Yeah. Film. What are some films that have been meaningful to you?
McCabe and Mrs. Miller.
Oh,
One of
okay.
my all-time favorite movies.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's the haziness of it, because takes place, in Alaska, and it's always filmed. Interiors are always smoky because people are building fires. It's something that I try to emulate in prose sometimes.
Nice.
The Bicycle Thief, just Italian realism, just because of the simplicity of the story. The father's working, he gets his bicycle stolen, everything changes. I just wish I could write something as simple and as powerful as that movie. But like Earl says, I'll die trying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's cliche, but what advice do you have for young writers? A young person comes to you and said, I really want to be a writer. What do you tell them?
Well, it's kind of a cliche, my answer, but I would say to read as much as possible and to learn how to read critically and to read everything. I mean, I had this job working in a warehouse. I had to get up really early, and I had maybe a year and a half. This is after undergrad, before I went to graduate school, and I made a list of all the classic novels that I'd never read that I wanted to write, and then I made a list of all the contemporary stuff that I wanted to write. So I would go back and forth between them, thinking at first, well, I just want to get, Don Quixote out of the way, so I can read this new, I don't know, Richard Ford novel. And, but then at a certain point, it's like, I can't wait to get back to Balzac.
Mm.
You know, I want to get to Flaubert, and the way that I understood the conversation between what we're writing now and what we're writing then. I mean, everything I've done as a writer has come out of Madame Bovary, really. All
Wow.
the technical stuff, all the you know, the playing around with point of view. That's all Madame Bovary, and so much of what we do today wouldn't be possible without Proust, Henry James, you know, Jane Austen. So it's very important to read those writers, even though, you know, people think of the canon as being suspicious, and I understand that completely,
Sure.
you know,
Sure.
but there's some value to be gained from reading writers that came before you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, what's coming up for you? What do you have on the horizon?
I'm working on a novel, but it's, you know, I don't ever talk about what I'm working on. It's kind of a, I don't want to jinx it.
Okay. Okay.
I'll
Fair
say it's
enough.
going very slowly. And you know, I wrote the first draft of I Am the Light of This World in 3.5 weeks. Yeah. It was
That's,
like a manic blur, really.
yeah.
And I just did nothing but write. So this is completely different experience. This is very much a paragraph or two a day.
Mhm.
And I'm satisfied with that. I mean, that's the way I mostly write anyway. So yeah.
Do you have a ritual? Do you have a certain time of day that you always write, or do you have something that kind of structured or?
Very early in the morning, like when I was writing this book in Austin, I would get up at 3 and work till maybe 6, and then go swimming at Barton Springs, and then come home and work a little bit more, and then take a long siesta, and then get up and maybe work a little bit more, and then watch a movie, go to bed, yeah, or go out with friends and have dinner. And so it was very, when I'm working like that, I'm extremely regimented, but always in the early morning. Never, I can't do anything. You know, I'm surprised we're having this conversation, because usually after 2 o'clock, I'm brain dead.
Ah, okay. Well, thank you for doing it.
Sure.
So did you ever meet Tom at Barton Springs?
Uh,
Just an
with
inside joke there,
Oh, that time,
from your novel.
there are a few people around that, you know, could
Yeah.
qualify.
Yeah. One more, or maybe one and a half more questions, just kind of quick answer. This is a really hard question, but if you had to think of what was the most memorable concert you've been to or show that you've been to, live music show, what comes to mind?
Um, I mean, I saw the Stones in '74, and that, or maybe it's '73. I was very young, but I grew up loving the Stones. That was definitely my favorite band, and to see them, one of my first concert experiences, um, was just amazing.
Do you remember who opened for them?
It was a weird, it was a tour that was sponsored by Jovan Musk Oil. I don't know if you remember that. It was a men's perfume, and
Yeah.
I can't remember. Oh, I do remember. It was the Meters.
Okay.
And so, you know, what's the name? What the brothers,
Yeah.
Aaron Neville, the Neville brothers were
Okay.
in the band. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. You know, one of the reasons I asked if you know who opened, one of my regrets looking back at my concert history, I had tickets for I think it was 72 for the Stones, and Stevie Wonder was opening up,
Yeah.
and someone offered me a bunch of money for the tickets, and I sold them. And you
Oh,
know, of
really?
course, now I think, ridiculous. Well,
Yeah.
hey, Michael, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to connect here. I've enjoyed talking to you. I will put links in the show notes. Is there any place in particular you want me to point people?
Well, I have a website. It's michaelfparker.com. I'm not too tech savvy, and I have an Instagram page, but
Okay.
yeah, that's about it.
Okay. All right. Well, I might, if I find an interview with you, other interviews or something that I think are pretty good, I might might put that link on there too for people.
Be great.
But thank you so much again, and tell Will I said hi when you see him when he's up there soon.
Yeah.
And good luck to you.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
You take care, man.
You too.